Okay, so it looks like the number of people here is starting to settle. So I think we'll just get started. Cool. So yeah, where are we? So yeah, hello everybody. Thanks for joining for another Data Lab community webinar. My name is Stephen Thompson. I'm the Events and Community Manager at the Data Lab. Today's session is the first in our data visualization series, which has taken place all the way through November this year. So in a couple of minutes, I'll hand you over to our guest speaker, Mafe, who will speak for about 30 minutes before we open up to questions. So if you do have any questions throughout the session, please do make sure to pop them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to those at the end. We should have plenty of time for questions, so we'll try to get through as many of them as we can. We've also got a lot of new members here today. So if you are new to the Data Lab community, welcome, first of all, and thanks for joining. The Data Lab community, as hopefully you will discover over the next wee while, is a space for anyone who's interested in data and AI. We run regular events like the one today. We run in-person events. We run webinars. We've got an online platform with forums where you can join discussions and ask questions. We run a mentorship scheme, which is completely free to use. We've got a jobs board and loads more. So definitely get involved. If this is your first community event or you've just recently joined the community, let us know in the chat. Say hello, and we'll welcome you to the community. So now, as I said, this afternoon's session marks the first in a series of events and webinars focused on data visualization, and they all take place throughout the next kind of 3 to 4 weeks in November. We've got sessions covering today's sessions, for example, data visualization fundamentals. We've got sessions on storytelling with data. We've got an in-person event on the 12th of November in Edinburgh, which is all around kind of the importance of understanding your audience when you're building a data visualization. Got a session on building dashboards, and we've got another session at the end of the month around accessibility and data visualization. And even more excitingly, all of these sessions coincide with our data visualization competition, which you might have seen we announced earlier this week. For the competition, we're focusing on climate change and climate action. And to be in with a chance of winning, you need to build a data visualization using data that's provided by the Edinburgh Climate Change Institute. So the top prize is worth over £500. And if you're interested in taking part, make sure to check it out. I'll pop a link in the chat in a moment. We've had loads of interest in the competition already. So if you are planning on entering or you're thinking about entering, let us know in the chat as well. It'd be great to see who's here, who's planning to take part in the competition. And hopefully by the end of the session today, you'll have picked up a few tips and tricks that might help you along the way. So for today's session, I'm delighted to introduce Mafe, who is a data visualization specialist and marketing analyst at Flourish, which is a part of Canva. Maria combines her expertise in data storytelling with strategic marketing insights, and her work focuses on teaching data visualization best practice. In this session, Maria is going to break down the science behind effective charts as you discover the visual elements that encode information, and you learn how our brains naturally compare and read data. Maria's belief is that great data viz isn't talent or guesswork, but it's a learnable skill that you can develop. So sit tight for a session kind of full of practical takeaways, tips, and tricks. So on that note, I won't take up any more of your time, and I will pass you over to Maria.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. I will say I'm not responsible for whether you win or not the prize, but I'm happy to share some tips that maybe that might help you. But yes, as Stephen mentioned, my name. Oops, sorry. Let me just start presentation. There we go. I'm María Fernanda, but everybody calls me Mafe. So if you're a bit confused about like the swap between Maria and Mafe, that's why. It's a long name, I know. So I just like to always start my sessions by breaking the ice and saying addressing the elephant in the room, I guess. And as Stephen also very kindly mentioned, I am a data visualization specialist and a marketing analyst at Flourish, which is the data visualization tool that's part of Canva, if you're familiar with Canva. And today I'm going to be talking to you about how to make your charts work. And I've like very purposely called this data visualization decoded because as Stephen also mentioned, I really believe that data visualization is not like tricks and magic or anything like that, but actually it's a very learnable skill. It's something that everybody can develop and they can get good at. And I truly think that the key to that is just if you understand the building blocks and the foundations, then you're able to make your way and build your practice. Now, in my job, I've taught data visualization to customers, to students, to facilitators doing data visualization trainings, and I've dealt with a lot of people that have struggled with data visualization in the past, or they're struggling to get started, or maybe they're not struggling, but they simply don't know what to do or where to begin. And I've heard anything and everything from I struggle in communicating my insights to my audience. My company's charts are boring. I can't code and therefore I feel like I cannot do charts, or data visualization takes too much time and effort. Like I've heard it all. And I can say that basically the core problems that I've identified in my work as a data visualization specialist are three key problems. People either struggle conveying a message, so they feel like the work that they're doing, the charts that they're doing, however they're putting data out, it's not landing with their audience, that they are having difficulty picking the right chart. So maybe they are making charts, maybe they feel quite confident in their journey, but they're finding perhaps that they're just not finding the right language to speak, right? They're not finding the right tools to to show their data. And last, but I feel like this is an issue that we all face, is the feeling that we don't have enough time, or we don't have enough resources, or we just don't have enough skill to maybe make good charts or charts that are delivering the results that we're expecting. So my goal for today is to solve, or at least to be in a better place than where we started with these core problems. And it wouldn't be a session in 2025 if I didn't mention the word AI, but with a little bit of sprinkle of AI as your creative partner. And this is something that I do on my day to day. I rely on tools heavily to do brainstorming, to do some have dialogues with tools, and actually to improve my own chart practice. So this is something that I will be embedding throughout the whole session. But what I really want you to pretty much believe from the get-go, and this is like my hot take, is that data visualization is like a language. And like any language, you are going to need vocabulary, so your words, your alphabet, your letters, and your grammar. So your syntax, your rules, the way you're connecting those words together to make them make sense, to make sentences, to make full-on pieces. So this analogy of vocabulary and grammar simply means that in data visualization, you need, or you have elements and you have rules. And it's a combination of those elements and those rules that actually enable you to make good charts, and charts that actually reach your audience and that deliver the results that you want. Now, going into the first problem, I would like you guys to participate on the chat if possible. And I would like you to say, what do you think is wrong with this chart? I got this from the subreddit Data is Ugly. So if you're ever in search for any sort of examples of what not to do with data visualization, maybe this is a good place to start. And this is from data from levels.fyi. So this is data on senior software engineer salaries across the Magnificent Seven companies in the US. So let's see. 7 charts, different scales, feels pretty messy and chaotic. Can't see the axis titles. What do the dots even mean? Too busy. It's difficult to read, inconsistent axes. Okay, stunning. You're all right on the money. So I think anybody can say what's wrong with this chart, and we can all like arrive to different conclusions. But I picked the following 4. Vague title, because whether you believe it or not, charts are not just the core components. Like it's not just your bars or your dots, it's also all the text surrounding it. So vague title, I have no idea what the time range is. I have no idea what they're talking about. I didn't know that software engineers stand for SWE. So like I had to Google that. So just not very clear in terms of communicating with an audience. A couple of people mentioned it, but axes are inconsistent and the facets are not aligned. So if I'm looking at this range, for example, Apple's salary goes from 250K to like 489K, whereas Google one starts at 332, yet these two are positioned in the same place. So actually, if I were to be like transparent about this star should start earlier, this facet should start earlier, right? It's just not a fair way to compare. Logos are distracting and noisy. There's so many things here. You have like a little watermark across different elements. It's just a lot happening at the moment. And logos might be a good idea if you're trying to remove perhaps text. So in this case, we all knew which companies we have in front of us, even if we don't have the title per se, but it just gets quite clutter. And I also added too many unjustified colors. Like if I'm having the logo, maybe that's enough. Maybe I don't need a specific color for each of the facets. It just felt too overwhelming. But more than all of these little niggles that we may find with the chart, the actual issue is that we are not guiding the audience attention intentionally, right? Charts are communication pieces. Like your goal with a chart should always be to deliver a message to an audience. However expert that audience is, however technical they are, doesn't really matter, but the goal is that you're trying to communicate something. There's always an exchange of information. And the same that we do with language when we are adding context to a story, when we're talking to a friend, we are guiding their attention and we're guiding their way through understanding. And bad charts oftentimes don't do that, or they do it unintentionally. Maybe they're using different elements, maybe they're using different resources to try and convey something, and they're just not getting exactly where they need to be. So that's why I combine guiding with intentionality, because you may be guiding your audience attention, you might be doing it wrong, or you might not be doing it at all, or you might be doing it right and just unintentionally, which would be a happy mistake, but not something that we want on our day-to-day as data visualization practitioners. So here we're going into the vocabulary end of the vocabulary versus grammar analogy that I presented earlier. So we're going to be seeing elements. And I'd like to present to you the visual variables by Jacques Bertin, or what I want to call is data business vocabulary. So these literally is the alphabet of data visualization. Any chart that you see out in the wild is made of a combination of these elements. We got position, which is where something is on a scale or in a plane. Like if you're thinking of just like a rectangle, where are things in specific place, like this dot's here, this dot's here, and what does that mean? And how is this conveying data, right? Size, when something is like smaller or bigger, like what is that telling me? It's talking about magnitude. Hue, so we're having different colors to maybe separate categories or like just distinct certain elements. Orientation, is something going up? Is something going down? Are we talking about left to right, light to right? Like all of these things are important. Value, just going from lightness to darkness. So this can be maybe a continuous scale if you're thinking about color scales or how to decode data. Shape, perhaps a bit more uncommon, but if you're trying to just single something out, you might be using a different shade. And same with texture. So just adding maybe texture to elements of your chart to, again, draw attention. All of these are resources to build charts, but also to drive attention to specific elements. So if we think about those in practicum, if we think about like scatterplot, for example, it relies on position to position the dots on a scale, depending on two variables. So in this case, GDP per capita versus life expectancy. If we add a variable of size, maybe we're able to compare which countries, depending on their population, are perhaps more prosperous and have a longer life expectancy. And then if we add an element of color, we're able to single out high-income countries versus low-income countries and upper middle and lower middle. So just relying on these elements, we can tell completely different stories. The first chart can just be your classic, countries with higher GDP per capita live longer. But then what's the correlation to population, right? If we add the size, it's like, can we say that bigger countries or countries with more people live longer? Or like, is there a direct variable there? And likewise, I mean, in this case, it's quite obvious, but high income countries do end up having obviously more GDP, but also higher life expectancy. So the point here is that just by leveraging this visual elements and by choosing them carefully, you're able to tell different messages, the same message with a different level of intensity or with a different intention, perhaps, to what your audience is going to take away from it. And again, like my humble attempt of improving this, the original chart that we just saw by leveraging the visual variables would be to strip it away from the color, strip it away from those icons, strip it away from the unaligned axes, putting everything together on a single axis. And this was sort of like my first iteration that I did with Claude. I literally just scraped the data from the chart, parsed it through Claude, said, build a chart for this, or like build a box plot. I wanted to recreate the exact same chart, and I just refined it further with Flourish. That's it. And in this case, I'm leveraging, in my opinion, position way more than the other variables. I'm not using color to direct attention. I'm not using direction. I'm simply using position. I'm not even using size, just position, to make sure that the audience understands, okay, what's the salary range and which are higher and which are lower. And having everything aligned on a scale gives you so much clarity. You can see how they decrease, which are the ones that have like a higher median, or yeah, exactly. It's a classic box plot. But I feel like this was a bit of a transformation of the classic box plot and just made something that worked very simple. into something quite complicated and cumbersome, right? So sometimes going to the basics is just the best policy. Now, keeping my promise of sprinkling bits of AI with the session, the way I like to use AI whenever I'm charting is to use it as a creative partner. So I will ask it questions. For example, look at this chart. I can upload a screenshot, anything up like when I'm working. It can either be my chart, somebody else's chart, and then I can ask it questions like, what is the key message you're getting from this, right? I'm trying to convey something, but what are you getting? And if the tool is getting that specific message, which is different perhaps to what I'm trying to say, chances are that other people looking at my chart might have a similar experience. So there's something I can do there to definitely change that and just improve my chart already. Or I want an audience to focus on the comparison between categories or whatever you want, comparison between X and Y or increase of this variable, suggest changes to my existing chart if it's not already doing that. So nothing too complicated, nothing highly technical, simply leveraging tools and their knowledge and the fact that they can conglomerate so much knowledge to get pretty much like a critical opinion on how you can improve your chart. Now for the second issue, which was difficulty picking the right chart, oftentimes people, or well, I'm going to rephrase that. People should be thinking in these two key things before making a chart. What is the data that you have available to you? And what is the story that you're trying to tell? So sometimes people miss one or the other. Maybe they're too focused on the data and they don't know the story. Maybe they have a very clear story in their mind, but they don't have the data to support it. In any case, these are really good places to start when charting, but people oftentimes just miss the most important thing, which is focusing on how humans process information. Again, going back into the idea that charts are pieces of communication, the whole purpose is to deliver a message. And if we are delivering a message in a way that people don't understand by pure physiology, then we're never going to get anywhere. So the issue here really is that we forget that we're speaking to actual human beings because we just get too meddled in the world of data, we get too meddled in the work of technology, and we forget that ultimately these pieces of communication are going to be read and consumed by human beings. And thankfully, human beings we are very complex in many things, but we're quite simple in others. And perception is one of them. Like our brains are wired in a very specific way, and there are things that simply work and things that simply won't work. And it's basic biology. So here we're going into the grammar of my analogy, vocabulary versus grammar. We're going into the rules. So the way our brains process information and how can we leverage those bits to make sure that we are communicating effectively with our audience. So this comes from a study done by two psychologists, Cleveland and McGill. And what they did basically is they just studied how people perceived information and how can they decode different charts. And they pretty much strip that bare into what they call the perceptual tasks. So these, just think about them as mechanisms of conveying information and how the human brain perceives them in comparison to the others. So they did a scale of, I think, 10 variables or 10 perceptual tasks, and they ordered them from most effective to least effective. A couple of them I find very niche, like I rarely encounter having to use them, so I didn't include them here. And I focused on 6 that I think are very, very key that you're going to find pretty much on every chart and pretty much every day. So first we got aligned to a scale. What they discovered is that when elements are aligned on a scale, and we're talking about comparison, people are great at comparing. So if you think about having a bunch of people lined up, right, and they're ordered by who's the tallest and who's the shortest, you're going to gauge that fairly quickly. Even if they were not in the order, you would gauge who's taller and who's shorter because they're on the same plane, you're looking at them, they're all sort of like roughly with the same build. So our brains are really good at just understanding when something is higher or tall or shorter, sorry, when aligned to a baseline. So the key here is having a common baseline. Now, turns out that we're also not too shabby at doing the same thing when things are not aligned on the baseline. So if you think about the example of the box plot, they were not aligned to the base, like they were not rising all from 0. And yet we were roughly able to see which one had the highest range, which median was higher, like in a classic box plot, right? Humans are quite good at doing that. It's like something that just comes literally naturally to our brains. Same with length. We're particularly good at just distinguishing when something is longer or shorter. And these may seem like they are the same, but there are some nuances to it in terms of the fact that you have a scale where things are rising from it. Length doesn't necessarily have to just be horizontal, can be vertical, can have like different directions. So we're going to be seeing here, and it's just like by the longitude, really. Direction, again, something's going up, something's going down, something is increasing, something is decreasing. There are some nuances to this because sometimes increases are quite mild and maybe in a chart they're not going to be that well perceived. But in general, when it's quite noticeable, we're great at understanding when something is rising or diminishing. Now, area and volume I've picked specifically because we use them a lot, and I mentioned size as a visual variable, so obviously I'm talking about increasing or decreasing an area surface, but humans are not great at actually estimating the value of two areas that are a different value. So if I were to ask you if this circle or in this circle, like, is this circle half of the circle? Is this circle a third? Is it a fourth, a fifth? We're not great at gauging that. It's good for overall comparisons, but in specific cases, when maybe you are trying to get your audience to really get specific, really go into the nitty-gritty, maybe area is something that should shy away from. Or if you're thinking about clustering information, area can be a great resource. If you think about a map with dots that are sized by population or by a different variable, you're going to very quickly identify clusters, and that's a great way to do it. Are you going to be able to tell whether two circles are like the same or smaller and larger than others? You might get a bit caught up in the weeds there, but roughly you can still use area for many things. It might just not be suitable for specific tasks. And volume, if I remember correctly, volume, I think it's at the bottom of the pack. So we're not good at all at measuring or seeing the changes in objects that are in 3 dimensions. So 3D charts or like 3D pie charts, which were very popular at one point in time, are really like some of the worst possible ways of communicating data. Not because they are aesthetically not pleasing or maybe not to somebody's like, but simply because fundamentally, scientifically, they're just not really effective at conveying information, and our brains cannot wrap their heads or themselves around it. So some things to keep in mind. I believe you're going to get the slides later, and I've added sources to some of the papers that explain all of this, or some of the frameworks that actually talk about the whole research that they did and the perceptual tasks. And if you're interested in data visualization, I would highly recommend having a look at it. It's maybe on the drier end, but having this sort of like foundations in your brain and just understanding how things are actually perceived, I find to be extremely valuable. So I would encourage you all to have a look at that paper. And if you don't have time, you still have like resources online, such as the Visual Vocabulary by the Financial Times. And this is a wonderful resource. So this is an online repository that they have. It's an interactive piece where basically you have, and you cannot see it right here because it's a bit murky, but basically what they did is they organized chart types based on their function. So if you're looking at this ones, these are the charts that convey flow. So change of state or the change of different elements. Here we have the spatial one, so it's mostly maps. We have magnitude, so when something increases or decreases, change over time. So again, it pretty much it's self-explanatory, really. Distribution, etc. So this is a really good place to start when you're trying to maybe innovate a little bit in the charts that you're using, if you want to break away from your classic charts, or if you're trying to understand how a chart works specifically. This is a really good way to get started, and it's just a wonderful, completely free resource available online. So again, to our example, going back into this disjointed box plot with facets, what can we do fulfilling those perceptual tasks? Where, well, if we wanted to just focus maybe on the magnitude, so say like maybe the average salary of each of the companies, we could just leverage that axis aligned to the base and just do a very basic bar chart. Absolutely fine. No concerns there. If my goal was to only show overall which company has the highest salary by median, this is a perfectly good chart to showcase. Again, we have the normal box plot, we have a violin plot if we're more interested in actually showing that that little bit of an area. So we're leveraging the area aspect of the visual task there, and then we are having an unaligned axis, but still like a common axis that we can compare them to. And again, on this one as well, it would be the unaligned scale, but we can just see the range, right? So we can see that this company, that Meta, had a much larger salary range than, for instance, Microsoft, which is like a bit more condensed. And these are 4 different chart types. all within the same data and all telling completely different stories depending on which message you're trying to convey, or style you're trying to explore, or how much you want to maybe woo your audience, because perhaps these two are pretty much almost the same, but you may want to go for this one if you're trying to just have that wow factor just by virtue of the color, the dots, the different chart type, instead of going for the classic bar chart. Or opposite, maybe you just need to convey a message very quickly and you go for a classic chart that is perfectly fine and works absolutely okay. And again, to the point of just very quickly, because I spotted a question and I can answer that right now. This would be a bee swarm plot. So we have a bar chart, a box plot, a violin plot, and a bee swarm plot. And depending on which tool, some will cluster the dots on top of each other, some will simply repel the dots and like give you a sort of like more organic looking chart of where everything is within the scale. But effectively, these are distribution type charts, and this is a magnitude type chart, if we go back to the visual vocabulary on the FT's resource. And again, things or ways you can leverage AI for this particular example is, I want to focus on specific aspect of my data set. I want to focus on how values are changing over time. I want to focus on the range of salaries within different companies. What chart types are most suitable for me? You can just use that. You can feed it the FT's visual vocabulary and then say, use this as a reference only. You can do so many things with AI tools, and you can add so much context to them to help them help you in your journey. Another example can be, look at my data. So uploading your data set, if it's not obviously sensitive information, if you're able to do so, and suggest 5 different chart types that I can build and tell me the strengths of each one. So maybe if you're on brainstorming mode and you don't have a clear idea or like a clear story you're trying to tell, perhaps you're just able to upload your data and say, give me ideas, give me options of what I can do with this data set. And perhaps you're going to discover chart types, or angles to your data that you wouldn't have thought of before. So really, really, really good way to break away from usual chart types and to build that muscle of like, which charts can you use for different types of data, or how a single data set can look very differently. And the last issue, which was the lack of time, resources, and skill. I mean, I think it can be easily solved with just these 3 ideas. That one is, if you leverage the theory, so that grammar, vocabulary bit that I've just said, those elements and those rules, to make decisions, you can make decisions much quicker. Because if you're thinking of, oh, I want to show change over time, and I really specifically want to highlight how this one country has been rising in this category, then you know that you can leverage the visual perceptual tasks, right? And go for something like a line chart, right? Direction. And then you can leverage color, hue as the visual variable and say, okay, so maybe I want a line chart that has all my series in gray and the one that I'm highlighting in red or in a different color, because that's the story I'm trying to tell. And those decisions come from theory. And the more you know them, the more second nature they're going to become. So you won't have to think in, visual vocabulary or perceptual tasks terms, but it will just come second nature. And this comes with practice. Obviously leveraging the AI tools to ease the burden. This is like pretty much like life altering in terms of how now we all have at our fingertips access to resources and tools that maybe before we didn't have. And if you don't have the skill, you don't have to code to be able to make charts with AI that at least work as a first pass to the project you want to build, or maybe they can be the full extent of the project you're trying to build. Like literally, these are lowering the entry barrier for anybody into this sort of skills. And lastly, and I think these two tie very well together, is that you really need to be working with tools, with good tools at all levels. It doesn't matter if you're just starting, it doesn't matter if you are further in your journey. Having the best tools at your side is one of the best tips that I can give anybody. In anything really, but in data visualization, it's particularly true. It's like getting used to a tool, understanding it, leveraging well, gives you so much benefit on the long run. And here I am going to be doing a bit of a shameless plug. But as Stephen mentioned, and I mentioned at the very beginning, I work for Flourish. Flourish is a data visualization software that's completely cloud-based, and we have a free plan as well as paid plans for companies. But we really do focus on democratizing data visualization for everybody. We offer dozens and dozens of templates ready to go for anybody to create charts that are aesthetically pleasing, that follow the theory basics that I just mentioned, that are animated, that are ready for web publishing, that are also embeddable across surfaces. So you can have them, if you can think about having them on your website, but maybe you want them downloaded and posted on social media, you could absolutely do it with the tool. I'm happy to go a little bit more in depth of the tool if we want to, maybe during the question rounds, if you want to see more about it. I'm not gonna stop too much here, but I will definitely encourage you to have a look at the website, have a look at the solutions we provide, and see whether that works with you. But I truly do believe that Flourish is a great tool for anybody at any stage of their data visualization journey. And one of our key bits is that we are extremely flexible as a tool. Like the charts that we provide, the options that we give, the customization you can do with the charts is really, it's almost limitless, and you can do so much with the tool. And these are the 3 resources from Flourish specifically that I will leave you with, which is our webinar series if you're more interested in learning about using the tool, but also a bit more about data visualization theory. We do go in depth into that on a couple of sessions. Our blog, so we post we don't have necessarily like a fixed frequency on when we post blogs, but we have blogs on how to use the product, how to build specific charts, how to leverage AI specifically for data visualization, how to use filters, how to use so many things that maybe you can ask yourself that question in your next project, or maybe you just want to explore. It's a really, really good resource. And I would just encourage you to really play with your data. It's like, specifically in the case of Flourish, you just have a data set, chug it into Flourish and see what comes out of it. Different templates have a bit of different requirements, and you will have to, like, be in the tool and actually try it out on to understand what works for you and which charts you like the best. But this is the best way to just like get started with Flourish Release. Just like hop in there and give it a go. But to sum up, and then we have more time for questions, what we need to do really to make charts that work is to intentionally direct your audience attention. It's to choose your chart based on how humans process information and also the story you're trying to tell, but like making it easier for people to understand it, and to work with the right tools. So surrounding yourself with the best tools and working with them. And I'll just pause here, Stephen, in case you want to reemerge, and then we can go over questions.
Yeah, thanks very much, Murphy. There's loads of information in there, and I guess you said at the beginning that you can't be held responsible for whether somebody wins or does not win the competition. But hopefully, if anybody's thinking about getting involved, then they'll be better prepared for that. We've got a lot of questions coming in, and just a reminder to anybody, if you do have any questions, if you could put them in the Q&A, we'll make sure that we get to them, we don't miss them. There's a couple coming in the chat as well that we can maybe get to, but just if possible, pop them in the Q&A so that we don't lose them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had a few coming in while you were speaking there, so I'll get to some of those just now. And one of them that I was wanting to ask first was, yeah, I guess somebody who's just getting started with data visualization, where would you suggest that they spend most of their time when they're learning? And do you consider that there is a kind of a most important principle that somebody should try to grasp to begin with, or is there an area that you'd think is best focusing their time?
That's a good question. So I think if you're starting with data visualization, I would split it into 2. If you're starting with data visualization, but you already know data, so meaning you're data literate, you know how to get your way around it, you can slice and dice it however you want, I'd say pick a tool, any tool, you want, and just really chug it with data and just try it out. It's like there's so many things out there. There's so many things you can try, open source, private, with license, without licenses. And it's just a matter of something's going to work for you. And it's more important to feel comfortable in at least in one single tool, and to experiment with it. And I think everybody's quite different, but I find it consistently to be true that for data visualization, working with a project is probably the best way to force yourself to practice and to actually build something. I find it extremely hard to, out of the blue, choose a data set and be like, oh, okay, I'm going to be playing with this for the next 4 hours. It's like I need to have some sort of like skin in the game. And like it can either be a topic that I'm fascinated about, it can be something in the news that I'm like, okay, if I produce something, like say the next 2 days, I can post it on LinkedIn and it's relevant, but I've also like, honed my skills a little bit and learned something new. So giving yourself those bits of time constraints or constraints plain might be the best way to get started. And I'd say also look for references. Like there are amazing creators out there that have their own style. Some break the rules entirely, some do more data art, but there's so many people doing amazing charts. And I think it's really good to have references and to have them across the board, to maybe have somebody that's more of a business analyst that's great with dashboarding or like reporting. That's amazing. To have a data artist that's very abstract and conceptual and they're doing really like innovative stuff. That's amazing as well because it really fits your creativity.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, I guess the more you kind of look at references and look at the things other people are doing, the more you'll kind of build your own repertoire of tools and skills that you can use. And
Yeah.
kind of building on what you mentioned there, you said around kind of like pick a tool or pick a platform and go from there. Obviously, you're an advocate for Flourish, but in addition to Flourish, are there any libraries or tools that you would recommend for beginners that are keen to get started?
For beginners, that's tricky. I mean, the thing is that if you asked me this question maybe 2 years ago, I would have gone for anything on the web. Like raw graphs. I think it's like an open source project. You basically downloaded the SVG and then you can do that in like other like Figma, Illustrator, Affinity, whatever it is, and you can edit that chart and they're quite nice. Lots of print publishing. I've seen it. Back in the day, Tableau used to be very public, like popular as well. Tableau public. I feel like now people are shying a little bit away from it. That may be a personal interpretation, but I feel like there's been a shift in how people are using Tableau. But I would not have recommended coding languages. I would not have said go and do Python and do like Matplotlib or like Seaborn or go to R. But now that you have AI tools, that's the thing for me. Is like you really can go and say, do this in D3 for me. And maybe you can ask it to explain what it did, right? It's like, here's a simple data set, code this in D3. D3 is like the library for data visualization in JavaScript. It's the building blocks pretty much of anything you will see in web publishing, I dare say, that it's dynamic. And you can sort of reverse engineer it now. Before you had to be the one doing all the lines of code and like learning JavaScript and like whatever it was. And now you're just able to say, do this in R, do this in Python, do this in JavaScript and like and learn from it. So I'd say that really there's there are no limits. There are no limits to it at whatever level you are, by the way.
Yeah, that there's a question that's coming from Pete, who says, you mentioned AI a couple of times. How do you see this changing data visualization kind of moving forward? I guess that's kind of you've kind of answered that there. It's kind of
Yeah.
making these platforms a bit more accessible for people who might not have the coding
Yeah,
background.
I think it's very exciting. There's a okay, I don't know the university, so I'm not going to give the wrong university, but Enrico Bertini, he studies a lot of data visualization. I think he's focusing his work now a lot on data visualization and AI specifically, because I think there was a little bit of a panic craze at the beginning of the year where people felt like, oh my God, everything is helpless now, like everything's going to be AI. And I don't think so. At least for now, it's like I feel and I find them to be just like a creative partner or like a solutions consultant where if I'm stuck in something. Thank you. Somebody said it. Enrico Bertini from Northwestern University. He's amazing. He's written a lot about like how AI is faring into data visualization, what's happening there. But my personal take is that it is great for getting off the ground. It's great to get started. It's great to get brainstorm. It's great to get like a quick MVP, like a quick product, a quick draft if you need something. I still value a lot of the craft, like being there hands-on with your data, um, doing like the heavy lifting. I think it's still very valuable. And AI still makes a lot of mistakes. And with data, you really cannot afford to make those mistakes. Like you cannot afford those hallucinations because then it can completely change the narrative of a chart, or it can make a chart
Mm.
like it can render a chart useless if you have fake data that somewhere in the mix got, slipped in those iterations. So I think right now they're great for getting started. They're great for like criticizing your chart. They're great for learning new tools and like, get up to it. But I think still we need a lot of expertise and humans in the back end to make sure that it's all going well.
And related to that, not specifically around the use of AI, but Pete's asking, you kind of touched on it there. If you have any tips for, if you're building a data visualization, if you've got any tips for how to confirm that the visualization does accurately convey and represent the data that you're working with. Pete says he's keen to understand how to double check that his analysis is correct and that he doesn't misrepresent something by mistake.
With AI specifically?
Well, no, so Pete hasn't mentioned AI, but I guess it's
In
kind of
general.
in general, yeah.
I mean, I think something that I do even, so if I'm doing analysis, right? If I'm on the analysis stage, I will always have sort of like a stat summary. So I'm like, I got a massive data set, and obviously if I have a million rows, I will never know what's happening on row 100,068. It's like, that's just not possible. So I will always have like my stat summary, right? It's like, give me the highs, the lows, the mids, the ranges. And you can still like pre-AI, humans made a lot of mistakes and we still do make a lot of mistakes. And like you don't see anybody going in through like, the quintessential bubble in a bee swarm to make sure that it's like at the right positioning. So like we also have to kind of like give ourselves grace here and like understand that there are levels to this. But in terms of precision, I think just like checking and testing your own hypothesis, checking and testing your own data, doing like integrity checks, these are so crucial. So that is either I don't know if this is the best way to do it because I'm not a programmer, but like the way I do it with when I'm like working with heavy data sets is I always save everything at different stages of my project. So like I always have versions of my data set through iterations. And if at one point I really messed it up, I can always revert back to like one of the variables and just be like, okay, so like I know that this one was fine because I saw it, I corroborated it, I like checked the integrity, it's fine. At one point in the mix, I did something wrong. This is no longer usable, discard that and move on to the next with the previous step. So it's sort of like version control of your own data. And in terms of visualizing, we will all make mistakes when learning how to visualize. And even if we know how to visualize, sometimes I look at a chart and I'm like, what the hell was I thinking when I made that? It's like, that is so not the right way to do it. And you will learn and things will change. And again, I go back and I sound like a broken record, but like I guess that's why I'm here. It's like if you go back to those foundations, really they've been there for ages. Like I don't know, I don't remember when Bertin made the visual variables, but like line bar pies, they were created by William Playfair, Scotsman, by the way. Gosh, I don't remember the century, but like this is I think 17th, 18th century. These things have been around for a while and they haven't changed. So I feel like we're fine going back to the foundations and just like sticking to them if we're in doubt of making mistakes or being untruthful, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point about kind of building in a process that gives you a bit of a backup in case things do go wrong. So we've had quite a few questions coming in specifically about Flourish. So I'll maybe ask a few of those just now, just while we've got you, because people seem quite keen to hear a bit more about it. So
Yeah.
Matt, I think this question is to do with Flourish. I think there's a version in the chat and then it's in the Q&A as well. So I think they're asking, PJ's asking kind of around the kind of the limits to the size of data points that can be put into a Flourish data visualization. Could it take something with 1,000,000+ points, for example?
Good question. So I'll preface by saying Flourish is not a BI tool, so it's not a Power BI, it's not a Tableau. We are on the other end of the spectrum, we're the communication end of the spectrum. So you're not going to be able to do data crunching in Flourish. In fact, you can do very basic data manipulations like pivoting, but you're not able to say calculate things or have calculated fields within Flourish. It means that basically you plug in your data once it's at a stage where it can be visualized with the tool. This is quite crucial, and that also affects size because oftentimes if you're at that stage of communicating, you rarely have that massive of a data set. So I think the largest we can do is with our maps, because they're quite powerful in the back end. And I think I worked with a map of like 600,000 rows, and it did struggle, but it was also my internet. But I'd say comfortably, we're like in the thousands of rows for sure, hundreds of thousands in a couple of templates, scatter plot maps specifically, but more in the thousands than in the millions for sure.
Brilliant, thank you. And then Matt has asked around kind of the export options that are available for Flourish within animated charts. Can these be? Could you just talk a little bit about kind of how things can be exported and what how that works?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do like a quick and show Flourish very quickly if people are interested in that. I don't mind at
Yeah,
all.
we've got time if people are interested in that. I think that could be helpful.
Okay, lovely. And yes, obviously I had it prepped because this thing happens. Okay, so okay, lovely. So let me just start by saying cool. Flourish at Studio. So here we go. So this is our site. If you're more interested about learning what the tool is, you can go here. You can go to our different landing pages and just like explore the tool or like examples if you're keen to see the type of charts we do. But you can create an account completely for free, log in or sign up, and then you would have access to your actual tool, which is this is what it looks like. So this is what Flourish is in a nutshell. And you can see that these are the charts that I prepped for this presentation, so nothing new under the sun. And I'm just going to show you what Flourish does by actually like walking you through the tool. So when you want to create a new visualization, something that's quite unique to us is that we ask you to choose a starting point. Like you have to be the one to decide where you want to begin in your visualization. And that's where choosing your right chart, knowing what you want to say, how to communicate with humans comes into play. Because then once you select or once you understand what you want to do, you will select the starting point and say, for instance, I'm going to be building a slope chart. And you will then automatically get a duplication of that starting point in your account. This is now completely private to your personal account. And all of our charts are pre-populated with sample data. And we've done this very, very intentionally from a product perspective because we find that people understand how things work once they see a sample data set. So all of our data sets are real. We source them from, well, various different sources, everything that's out in open source. But in this case specifically, we're talking about, I think it's percentage of, I want to say GDP, but I'm not too sure. And the key thing here is that with Flourish, you have to do these column bindings, what we call them, which is basically where you take your data set and you tell to Flourish, this is how I want to visualize this. This is what I want to do. So you have your name, you have your values, etc. I'm just going to see if I can, oops, show you how to import data very quickly. So this is a data set, extremely dirty and not cleaned at all, that I actually was working with for the session. So you're going to literally see what I did to build the charts. I go into Flourish, I create a new visualization, and I go in this case into the scatter plot, go into my data tab, and I will delete the data that's in there, and I can simply copy paste everything. Fine, I have all my data from my Google Sheet, and now I do the column binding. So in this case, if I want to recreate that bee swarm idea on my y-axis, which is my vertical axis, I'm going to have the name. So I have a categorical variable there, and then my total compensation is going to be my actual bubbles, and the name doesn't really matter. And for color, I'm going to make it be also the company. Lovely. And every template will have different settings, but if I go here into Bswarm, Box, and Plot Violins, if I do auto, it will already turn this into like that sort of like distributed visualization of the salaries. So that's it. It's like if that's my story, if that's what I'm trying to tell, if that's what I want to build, this is it. In terms of exporting and publishing, we are mostly like web publishing based. There are options to download. But they differ on whether you're on a paid plan or a free plan, but everybody can publish to share and embed. So if I publish this, which means that this is a live visualization, I'm giving an embed code, and you can make that a script embed or an iframe, depending on your CSM. And you can paste this on your website, your blog, wherever it is, and you would have an interactive version of the chart, which is sort of the point, right? It's like Flourish has a lot of animation options and interactivity, like the pop-ups, and I'm able to hover over and see information for each of these. So it retains the interactivity. If you wanted to do a screenshot of it as well and like then post that, for example, on LinkedIn, you cannot have interactive charts in the feed. You're able to do that as well. You can embed Flourish in a LinkedIn article, by the way, if people are like interested in like maybe exploring that and I don't know, furthering their personal brand, which I know it's on everybody's mind at the moment.
So we've got just over 5 minutes left, and there's still quite a few questions coming in that we've not got to. So we'll just maybe ask another couple before we wrap up. So the first question that came in earlier on was from Sarah, and she's asking, Do you find that the tools or the charts that you use in your data visualizations change depending on who it is that you're communicating with? Obviously, depending on the context of the data and what you're trying to communicate, you might choose a certain chart. But do you find that the audience that you're speaking to also affects that?
The tools or the chart types?
They've said tools, but I think tools and kind of chart types.
So the tools, I would say no, because the whole point is sort of like you wanted to stick with a tool that allows you to do pretty much everything. And if anything, it would be a matter of I can do this much with this tool and this much with this tool, depending on what I need. I will use one or the other. I think that's pretty standard. And chart types for audiences, 100%. If I like if I want to talk to someone that I know it's a bit more technical or it's more familiar with the the type of chart I'm about to show, maybe I can feel more confident in like throwing that in. I think journalists and data journalists are particularly good at doing this because sometimes they have to introduce a brand new chart type to a really broad audience and they have to say, hold my hand, we're in this together. You're about to see something that looks a bit wacky, but like here's how it works. And I think Financial Times did it with the financial crisis data. So I think they build a Marimekko. And a Marimekko, it's basically like a bar chart, a stacked bar chart where you also have a width that change the variables. So it's dual numerical, two axes for numbers, but it looks like a bar chart on asteroids almost. And I think they did this because they were trying to convey how big an economy was and how big their deficit was. And they did a really great job. Like they explained the whole thing. They had a whole intro paragraph walking people through how to read a Marimekko. And I think that's a really good example of how sometimes it's not so much your audience can get it. Like we all can get it. And that's my whole point. It just matters how you convey it because maybe you need to do some hand holding that you're not doing. Maybe you need to do some breaking down and like really turn it down into pieces so like people can grasp it. But I think that with the right instructions, you can definitely do it. However, do you want to do that all the time? Do you want to do that for every project? Do you want to do a constant kumbaya hand-holding moment for every chart you publish? Maybe no, because that does cause like a lot of like cognitive overload. So it's a trade-off and a balance. If you feel like that is the best way to show your data and you're like confident and you say, yes, I'm doing this. It's like I am walking through this with people. I got it. Amazing. Go for it. But I think it takes time and you need to know your audience very, very well.
Yeah, so I actually had a conversation quite recently with Nicola Rennie, who's a data visualization specialist at the Office for National Statistics.
Mm.
I had a similar conversation around like if you're introducing a new type of chart that people might not be familiar with, you need to do it gradually and explain how to interpret it. So yeah, I guess obviously the audience will matter there. And if you are interested in more around kind of how to understand your audience and how to kind of factor that into your design, the meetup that we're hosting on 12th of November next week in Edinburgh is all around that. So if any of you are interested in that and you're in Edinburgh, definitely come along. We'll be live streaming it as well, so you can join online if you want. Okay, so I think we've got time for one more question before we wrap up. And I think we'll go with this. It's an anonymous question, but I think it's quite a good one. It's somebody's asking, how do you break into data visualization if you come from a graphic design background? So they've obviously got the graphic artistic side, but should they focus more on the visual side or the coding side? And have you got any tips on how to find a good balance with that?
Great question. I think first of all, you're not alone. Like I started becoming obsessed with data visualization, I think, when I was still in university. And this was like over 10 years ago. And at that time, I saw coders or graphic designers. There's one no in between. It was like either people being extremely technical with what they were doing or people being extremely talented and graphical and like they had all these tools and like all these resources. And I felt like, where do I fall in the middle of this Venn diagram situation? So I'd say you're not alone. Like I feel like that's a very valid and common place to come from it. I think whether you focus on one or the other depends on where you want to land. Because if your proposition is going to be, I'm not a coder, I all I do is like I visually communicate insights, it's like I am a visual communicator, like an information designer, then you can 100% hone in into your um, graphic design skills and just like really build a portfolio around that. And you have amazing references like Federica Fragapane, Valentina De Filippo, and Tiziana Allocci. Three are Italian, which I've always wondered whether there's something there saying like, is this like a mindset that's happening, or just a coincidence? The three of them brand themselves as like information designers. Neither of them code. And I've had conversations with them about how they are so fine not coding because what they bring to the table is something else. And then they partner with then other people. So it's more of a collaborative situation that they have going on there. And they make amazing charts. Highly recommend looking at all of them. They have very distinctive visual imprints. Like you know when you're looking at a chart that's made by either of them. And that's a skill in and of itself. And if you definitely want to go in a bit more like, no, I want to work with like data dynamically. That's another thing. Is that if you're trying to do things dynamically or you're trying to like have live data or host data somewhere, I feel like you do need to go a bit more technical into the programming side. Um, if you have that sort of like curiosity and you're like, no, like it's I'd say I find that people that tend to go for the more back-end programming route are people that are also very drawn to data as a concept. Like people that really want to go deep into being able to query, slice the data, have it live, have it here, have it there. People that are more interested in just like organizing information in a specific way could go into the other side. This is an extremely personal take, but I find that to be the case in my experience.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. That was a great answer. Oh yeah, we've got Luigi saying that we are artists by nature, the Italians. And Walter, just the last question since we're on it. Walter's asking if you could maybe pop the names of those designers in the chat, or if you've got like a link to a blog or something. That'd be but that'd be great. But thanks again, Mafe, for joining us. It's been a really interesting session with loads of information and lots of questions from people. So I guess if anybody wants to keep in touch or get in touch, what's the best way for people to contact you if they'd like to get in touch? Just through LinkedIn, probably the
Great
best bet.
question. Yes, I think LinkedIn, honestly, it's the best way. I'm just gonna pop in my profile link over there so people can access it very quickly. Um, There we go. And I think I spotted, if I can just answer one more product question.
Yeah,
Someone
go
was
for it.
asking whether when you publish a Flourish chart, if the data is available for people to see. And the answer is no, unless you want to. So we make data private by default, but if you have like a specific offset, offset? Sorry, a specific oh my God, I forgot the word. A specific feature, let's call it feature, that says duplicate this chart or make this chart duplicable by others. And as soon as you make a chart duplicable, obviously the chart comes with data. So like that's when you make data available. Um, Setting, thank you so much. Oh, thank you. But yeah, that's pretty much it. But if you have any questions at all, I'm always so happy to talk about data. I'm a huge data visualization geek. This field is amazing. I feel like it really opens up so many communications channel. It's a great skill to have. I think it's becoming more and more important for people to have it. I think we long gone are the days of like, oh no, I can get away without knowing how to do these things on my day to day. I think we are really coming along to that side of I don't know history right now. So it's a great skill to have. I'm very happy to support people in their journey and any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Yeah.
Right, thank you very much. Yeah, as I said, it's been great to have you here. Obviously, we can see there's lots of people saying that that they thought this was a great session. So thanks again. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's obviously Data Visualization Month in the community, so we've got a lot coming up between now and the end of November. So please do check out the events board on the community. If you scan the QR code on the screen, it'll take you straight to the community, or you can head to community.thedatalab.com. We've got all the events coming up in the events board. And as I said, we've got the competition, which is just launched. So if you are looking for a project to work on, Matthew, you mentioned that obviously the best way to learn is getting stuck into a project. So if you're looking for a project, we have one for you.
Yeah.
So yeah, please do check it out. And yeah, prizes to be won, tickets to Data Fest, etc., etc. So hopefully see lots of you taking part in that. And if not, we'll see you at the next webinar, which is the next event is actually a week today in person in Edinburgh, but we have a live stream and then we've got webinars taking place kind of weekly after that. So yeah, thanks again everybody for coming along and see you soon. And thank you again, Mafi.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye. Cheers.